Okay, the video that I am going to do for you today is about subtracting integers, but that's actually just the review part. We are going to take subtracting integers and apply it to order of operations and different grouping symbols like PEMDAS and fraction bars. Alright, so subtracting integers. If you remember that on a number line, if you're simply subtracting, we'll start very easy, like back in first grade when we took 6 and subtracted 2. Well, on a number line, that's nice and pretty, right? We used to do this. We started at 6 and subtracted 2, and we ended up with 4. But as we get older and we've added more types of numbers into our problems, we are now going to subtract numbers like a -2 and -6, or like a -10 and a +6. So let's look at what that looks like on a number line. If I started at a 3 and I subtracted 6, I'm going to start here and I'm going to subtract 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That equals a -3. Or if I had done a problem like this, I had a -1 and I subtracted 3. I'm going to start at a -1 and subtract 1, 2, 3. And it equals a -4. Technical difficulties. I'm going to move the screen over so I can click on it. But it's not always so nice and pretty to use a number line for when we're doing integers. If I had a problem like a -2 and I'm subtracting a -4, that is actually read, I'm taking a -2 and I'm subtracting in the opposite direction 4. So looking at our number line, I'm no longer taking -2 and going in the subtracting direction. I'm taking -2 and subtracting in the opposite direction, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if I'm doing that, I'm doing the opposite operation. I'm using addition. Well, all of our subtraction problems can be used using addition. And then that allows us to quickly do our higher number problems so that we are able to add them because we already have the rules for adding integers. So, for example, on number 3, I take a -2 and I, instead of subtracting, remember I went in the opposite direction, 4. Well, I added on the opposite of -4 was 4. Well, a -2 plus 4, well, there's 2 more positives than there are negatives, so I have a +2. We could have done that with any of our problems. We could have changed a -1 stays a -1 and changed this to a plus and adding, and we're adding the opposite of 3 as a -3. Well, -1 plus a -3, we're adding on more negatives. We're totaling up 2 different negatives to total up to a -4. We get the same answer. It's because we're doing the same problem. It's just we're taking and adding on the opposite instead of just simply subtracting. 3 stays the same, and I'm adding on the opposite of a +6 is a -6. Well, there's 3 more negatives than there are positives. Well, this is going to come in handy when I subtract problems like this. -148 minus a -22. Off the top of my head, I'm not going to want to go to -148 on a number line and think, well, I'm subtracting in the opposite direction, 22. I would like to see that. So I'm going to take -148, which is what I would do on a number line, and I would add the opposite of -22 as a +22. When I add a +22 to the -148, How many more negatives are there than positives? So if you don't know it off the top of your head, remember you're taking the one that has the larger quantity, there's more negatives than there are positives, and you're subtracting to find out how many more. 8 minus 2 is 6. 4 minus 2 is 2. And we have 1. 126. There's 126 more negatives than there are positives. We could do this for any number of problems. So we have 196, and I'm subtracting a negative 13. Once again, I'm subtracting integers. All subtraction problems can be changed to addition. So I'm starting at 196, and I'd be subtracting in the opposite direction, which is the same thing as adding. The opposite of negative 13 is a positive 13. And we get 209. Now, this became even more relevant when we started adding in order of operations with our integers. So, in this problem, 3 times negative 6 minus 2 all over negative 2 times 2. Well, order of operations tells me I need to do grouping first. Here's a grouping right here with my fraction bar. It's grouping the top together and it's grouping the bottom together. So we're going to do the top first. We're going to have 3 times, here's my subtraction problem. It's a negative 6 plus a negative 2. I'm taking and adding. The opposite of 2 is a negative 2. I put parentheses around the negative 2 so I didn't get that confused. And now I have divided by negative 2 times 2. And I keep going. I'm ready to add these together. Negative 6 plus a negative 2 is a negative 8. They total up to equal to negative 8. 3 times negative 8 over negative 2 times 2. And then it doesn't matter if I do this group first or this group first. 3 times a negative 8, well, I'm taking three groups of a negative 8, which is going to give me 3 times 8 is 24, and negative 24. If you do not remember that a negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times positive is a positive. Another way to remember that is if they have the same sign, they're going to be positive. If they have different signs, they're going to be negative. Negative 2, you have 2 groups of negative 2, so you have a total of negative 4. 2 times 2 is 4. A negative times a positive is a negative. Now here, in the end, I have negative 24 divided by negative 4. 24 divided by 4 is 6. A negative divided by a negative is a positive 6. All right, another one. I think we're on number 6. Are we on number 6? Oh, yes. I'd say we're on the 6th problem. All right, another one. This one includes an absolute value. 2 times the absolute value of 24 minus a negative 5. Absolute value is just another way of grouping 2 numbers together or multiple numbers together. So I have to do inside the grouping first. So inside the absolute value, I need to change that to an addition statement. So I'm going to have 2 times 24 add the opposite of a negative 5 is a positive 5. So now I'm going to have 2 times the absolute value of 29. The absolute value, remember, is the distance away from 0. And the distance can never be negative because you can never go a negative distance. It doesn't matter for distance-wise if I'm coming to school or going home from school. It's the same distance and it's a positive number. Same with this. The distance from 0 is going to be positive even if there's a negative number in here because it's just telling you how far away is it from 0. Well, 29 is 29 away from 0. So now I have 2 times 29, and I get 58. And the last one, Evaluate 3 plus 2 times the absolute value of x plus y minus y. And I'm telling you that x is equal to a -1 and y is equal to a -9. So before I can do anything, I need to substitute in those values. So here, my new statement is 3 plus 2 times the absolute value of a -1 plus a -9. And then I have minus, I cannot forget this minus sign. It has to come down with it, a -9. Because y equals a -9. Now, when I go to do this, I need to do grouping first. So I'm inside the parentheses, or in this case, it's an absolute value. -1 plus a -9 is a -10. So I'm taking the absolute value of -10. Here I have 3 plus 2 times the absolute value of -10 minus a -9. I still am doing the grouping. The absolute value of -10 is 10 because it is 10 away from 0. So I have 2 times 10 minus a -9. And then I'm going to do multiplication. So here's my multiplication. 3 plus 20 minus a -9. I am going to go from left to right when I'm adding and subtracting. So here I have 3 plus 20 is 23 minus a -9. And I need to take the first number and add the opposite of a -9 is a +9. And I get 32. All right, so if you need to re-watch that, make sure you're pausing it to allow yourself to try the problem on your own. Another way, remember, to do problem is to look on IXL, and sometimes you need to look in 7th and 8th grade and see if they have some harder problems that you're able to do. Another way you can study is to take the textbook and look at the section that you were struggling with, pick a problem out of it, solve the problem on your own, and then check Bob for the answer. Now, Bob is only good, the back of the book, is only good for odd numbers. And good luck studying.